him, man, don't go tell your father you about to rule over him. Joseph did God's will, his way. It was God's dream, but when he did it his way, it came back to backfire on him. But I want to begin to close. And the good news is this. When it comes to the reality of your dream, after you've wanted a dream that comes from God rather than yourself, after you've waited for a dream, and you've paid the price to let God work on your character and your development, after you've committed to do the ways of God, his way, I want you to know that lastly, it's going to lead to what I want to call some worship. Oh, praise the name of God. It's going to lead to some worship. And would you remember this last thought or write it down or just remember it in your heart and mind? I want you to know today, would you, if it's there on the screen, would you even read it with me? I want you to know that what? God's will, done what? God's way, will lead to what? God's glory and God's praise. When God's will is done God's way, is going to lead to God's glory and God's praise. And just in 2 Samuel chapter 6, I know our time is up, but I want you to know David's real installation service, David's real coronation service happened in 2 Samuel chapter 6. And in verse 13, it says, and so it was when the ark of the Lord had gone 6 paces, he sacrificed oxen and fatted sheep. And look at verse 14, would you? Verse 14 says, then David did what? Dance before the Lord with what? All of his might. And he was wearing an outer robe. And it says in verse 15, so David and all the house of Israel did what? Brought up the ark of the Lord with what? Shouting, and with what? The sound of the trumpet. And look at verse 16 says, now as the ark of the Lord came into the city of David, his wife, who was Saul's daughter, which was a problem, looked through a window, and guess what she saw her husband doing? David was not only dancing, David was leaping in the air. David was not only dancing and leaping in the air, he was dancing, leaping, and twirling in the air all at the same time. I don't know what he was singing, but he might have been singing that I'm so glad Jesus has lifted me. I'm so glad Jesus has lifted me. Satan had me bound, but Jesus lifted me. I want you to know today, when you've done God's will, you've done it God's way, and you've waited for God's time, weeping may endure for a night, but what? Joy will come in the morning. Some of you are going through a period of weeping. You're going through a period of waiting. But would you wait on the Lord and be of good courage today? And he will strengthen your heart. God knows how to get you today from where you are to where you want to be. God cares about you. And I think it's very interesting. And again, I'm through, but even when you get down to verse 21, there his own wife said, you shouldn't have been acting a clown like that. You shouldn't have been on your feet in church. You shouldn't have been making all of that noise. And here what David did, looked at McCall and said, sister, I want you to know something. It was God who put that dream in my heart. And even though your daddy tried to kill me the last 14 years, God is a good God. And he was basically saying, you ain't seen nothing yet. If you think I acted a clown in worshiping God then, you ain't seen nothing yet, as it were. And I just want you to know for certainty today that when God says yes, and when you realize your dream, it needs to start with wanting that which God wanted to begin with. Would you be willing to wait on God? And be of good courage, and he'll strengthen. He's up to something good. I know you think God is up to something bad, but he's up to something good. Would you make sure you're doing God's will, but executing it God's way? And if you're hanging there, would you hang in there? Your time of worship will come. Yes, it will. It'll come. It'll come. It'll come. It'll come. And it's just something about when I've done God's will, God's way, it's going to end up to God's glory and God's praise. Would you stand on your feet at this time? Would you stand on your feet?
Amen. Amen.